welcome if it's your first time. Um, Welcome to tonight's training. My name's Andy, and I try and do a training topic every week on one of the 5 pillars of business success. It's aimed at garage owners, but I guess a lot of what we talk about is applicable to any business. So without further ado, let's get on with tonight's training topic, which is business culture. So why is business culture important to both staff, employees, and the business? Is sort of easy to discuss is once we understand what a business culture is, because it's weird, because when we talk about culture, and I find it difficult to talk about myself, because the culture within a business isn't something you can touch. In fact, it's very difficult to explain, because it necessarily isn't a physical thing. It is more about attitudes, behaviours, and practices that occur within the business that are, if you like, they're not written down in any set of rules. They're just what this business does. This is the, if you like, the esprit de corps within the business. It's the non-negotiables within that business. What does this business stand for? That's what the culture is, and it can't be faked. The culture within a business can't be faked, and that's why I've put it in the marketing part of the 5 pillars of success. If you don't know what I consider to be the 5 pillars, they're simply planning, finance, performance, and then we look at systems, and finally marketing. Now, marketing is incredibly important within business, and everything we do is marketing. And I've done a training topic on that. And your culture is really evident in your marketing. And I'll give you some examples if we get a chance later on, if I don't waffle on too much. So now we've sort of established that a business culture isn't a tangible thing. It's more about shared attitudes, beliefs, and behaviours. It's kind of the non-written down, what we do here. This is how we do it. This is what we believe in within the business. We can then see why it's important for employees, because you want to be an employee in a business that has the similar culture to your own. Now, where does the culture come from? We'll discuss that in a second when we talk about our values and cultures, the same thing. But as an individual, you can normally tell whether or not you fit somewhere or you don't by how that place makes you feel. Now, it's difficult for a business or a prospective employee to understand the culture of a place simply during an interview or from a job advert. But I bet there are clues. There are always clues dotted about the place. And you can tell certain things about a business and its culture from your first impression. And if that first impression is favourable and you feel comfortable, then it's probably going to be a kind of match. If you're wondering whether or not you fit in, you probably don't. And that could be almost instant. Or it may take time for the individual to settle down and then start to show or feel whether or not they're culturally appropriate for the business they're in. And it doesn't have to be the big things that are different. And we'll talk a little bit about something called a value action gap in a bit. It can be very, very, very small differences in culture that can start to pull on the threads of a relationship until it starts to fray to the point where it becomes threadbare. And these are, in my opinion, very, very important. The cultural fit of a person and a business. Now, what about for your customers? Now, it's not always immediately obvious to a customer what the culture is within a business. But if you've had a repeat customer who's stuck around for a while, let's say 2 or 3 years, and has, introduced you to many other clients, he's probably a good fit culturally for your business. But what is that? Why does he believe in you and your shared attitudes and behaviours and what it is that you do? Why is that? Now, if you look at it from my point of view and how I view what we do as a business, is if you're bring in your most valuable possession, which is normally your children, and you're giving them to two strangers to bolt them into a lethal device, a racing car, you probably want to hope that the culture within that business is one of somewhat of check and double check. They're going to be fastidious about what they do. They're going to put safety ahead of everything else. So that would be a good sort of cultural fit if that's what you're doing. So if I'm going back a while now, when we first ran in a junior championship, we ran in something called Janetta Juniors, and this is where basically parents give us their 14-year-old children, or between 14 and 17 children, for us to strap into racing cars, which takes a big element of trust, especially when the parent is effectively guided, and our way of operating, if you like, around in that environment, around the parent and child relationship, was to try and remove the parent as far as possible away from the child within the car. The reason being is the parent's nervousness and agitation, or whatever was going on with the parent, often, wanting their kids to succeed, possibly more than the child does, passes from one to the other. So if you remove that distraction for the driver, the child in this case, we found that we could deal with the driver better when we remove the parent. And that takes a fair bit of trust in that relationship. So you can see what I mean by a culture between the customer and the business. And then that has to be the same, albeit at a slightly lower level. But let's face it, most of your customers trust them, or trust you, their garage, with possibly the second most expensive purchase they make in their life. Yeah, normally the house is the most expensive thing most people buy, and their cars are the second most expensive thing most people buy. If you live round by me, sometimes the car is more expensive than the house. Fact. But you can see that there's an element of trust. When they hand over those keys, it's a bit like handing over that child. The thing that they potentially treasure most is being given to a stranger, who then becomes less of a stranger and someone they trust, because they think the culture is one that they trust their prized possessions with. So you can see how that comes across. And we'll talk about how that is important in the marketing message, which is really what this training topic is about, is, are you conveying your culture in your marketing? Or does your marketing convey a different culture than the actual culture you have in the business? Remember, culture can't be faked. Now, you can pretend it's something else, but long term, it can't be faked. It is what it is. So the next sort of topic within what we want to talk about this evening around this whole topic of business culture is culture and are your values the same thing? Are we talking about the same things? What is the difference between culture and values? It's probably a better way of putting it. So, do you even know what your business values are? Now we're starting to get a bit deeper. Are your business values the same as your personal values? Now, for most business owners, the business values will be incredibly similar, hopefully, to their personal values. Because if they're not, there's going to be kind of, like I said before, but it's the same as the friction you would have between an employee and the business if there's not a cultural fit. If the culture of your business isn't the same as your personal values, there's a personal sort of friction. So, and the values, your personal values, are your fundamental beliefs and principles, and they guide basically all your behaviours and decision making, whether you like it or not. It's often conscious, these decisions that you're making. They're being made at a level that you're not always fully conscious of. And if you haven't sat down and worked out what your personal values are, it's unlikely you're going to understand fully your organizational values. So what's the difference between the values, which are kind of the beliefs and principles that guide an organization's behavior? Well, culture is slightly bigger, but it's the, if you like, it's the manifestation of the values. And now that sounds a little bit woolly, because it is. Because it's, like I said right at the beginning, it's not something you can act, it's not something tangible, it's not actually something you can touch, but it is, if you like, the attitudes and behaviors. So if values are the beliefs, this is probably the simplest way of putting it. If the values are the beliefs, the culture is the behavior. And it's how things are done within an organization. So if you think about values and culture, they're linked, but they're not the same thing. The values is what you believe, and the cultures are the behavior. So how does that result in a value action gap? So a value action gap is, if you like, a very, very, very difficult thing to have within a business or in a relationship. A value action gap can become a significant problem because it can erode trust and decrease sort of morale within a business. Because it's, and I'll read it because I'll never get it right if I try and paraphrase it. I'll read the little paragraph that I wrote down earlier on. The value action gap is a phenomenon in which an organization's stated values and beliefs do not align with the actual behaviors and actions of its members. In the context of business culture, the value action gap occurs when an organization claims to uphold certain values, such as honesty, integrity, and respect, but fails to exhibit these values in its daily operations and behaviors. So you can see that how it can become a significant issue within a business. Because if you think about, when someone talks about values, everyone, and I mean this, sort of sincerely, if you like, everyone thinks their values are honesty and integrity and all the things that are expected of them, but they're almost givens in business. I'm not saying that every business is honest, but that's how it should be. So you ought to go beyond what's expected of you in terms of your values. And if you go beyond and understand what they are, and then if you go beyond that, you'll understand some of the behaviors that take place in your business, especially if the business is built, if you like, in your image, which for most owners it is. The values and the culture of the business are built effectively in your image. So if your values and what happens in your business are not the same, they're not congruent, this causes immense friction between the owner and the business. And if the staff don't feel that what you're saying and what's happening is the same, you have this value action gap. Now, where this is really evident, and I made some notes once again because I can never remember everything I wanted to talk about, and we're starting to run out of time, is what about the business culture in marketing? Now, I'll give you the example that I want to sort of, that probably illustrates the point best rather than me waffling on. It's simply this. If your marketing message is sloppy, what do I mean by that? So let's say you put an advert out and it's inaccurate. There are, for example, spelling mistakes, the postcode's wrong, stuff like that, because you did it in a rush, because marketing's a kind of afterthought within your business. You knew you had to do something, put something out on social media today, you rush to do it and you put it out there. Now, that might not reflect the actual culture of the business. It probably doesn't represent the values of the business. Yeah. However, how does that look to a customer? Do they think your attention to detail when working on their car will be up to what they're expecting, if that's what they want from a garage? Or does your marketing look, shall we say, cheap, low cost rather than cheap? Let's use that term. Does it look like you haven't put much effort in? Therefore, does your marketing reflect the higher price point that your business charging? Or if your marketing looks really flash and looks like you've gone to a lot of trouble, is the customer going to feel that there's a cultural match when you're the cheapest garage in your area? Probably not. And that's where it comes across. And for example, if you're an extremely serious business and sort of high end, can your marketing have if you like, a comic or light natured tone? It probably can't. It depends on the culture within the business. And it's the same with the marketing channels. If you're a local community business with a local community feel, should you be advertising on a national level, or should you be doing local community marketing? You can see how all of this sort of plans out and why it fits into marketing business culture, because apart from the big things, i.e. your value action gap, if there's such a thing exists in your business, whether that between you and the business or the business and its employees, that needs to be fixed, because that, if there is any, if you have a value action gap, it is eroding the relationships within the business. However, if all of that's good and the culture is all agreeable within the business between the employees, the staff, and the owner, and that bit isn't a problem, and it often isn't, because they kind of works itself out. People leave if they don't fit, or you see fit to remove them. However, is the marketing message and the general branding of your business in line with the culture that you expect to portray as a business? And if it's not, you need to do something about it. And that's where having a, if you like, a marketing plan or a marketing brief is where you can start to, if you like, put on a piece of paper what your marketing culture looks like for your business and how it should be reflected in what you do. So if you remember nothing else from tonight's training, it's simply this: your values are your beliefs and your culture is your behaviours. Are they important? They're incredibly important, because birds of a feather flock together. You want to attract the right type of people to your business. Therefore, everything you do should reflect the culture within your business. And if everything you do is marketing, then your marketing should also reflect the culture within your business. I've gone over a little bit, as always. Thanks for staying if you have all the way through. If you've got any questions about tonight's topic, send me a direct message or get in touch via the email. If you would like to find out a little bit more about the Atomic Success Program, there's a chance I might be opening up a couple of places on the next intake, if you like, after Easter. That's when it will be. So if you're thinking about it and you want to know a bit more, send me a message and we'll get on a Zoom call and see if there's a fit. If not, carry on listening. Hopefully you'll learn something, because if I've made you think a little bit about your business culture and your marketing tonight, then I've done my job. Hopefully you'll have a pleasant rest of your evening, and I'll see you soon. Take care.